Thank you, Juri, for the introduction. So yeah, thanks for having me. I hope you can see my screen and the presentation.
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. Great. So yes, I've been with restaurants for more than 15 years now. And so I used to work with digital tools quite early on. And I was very excited about the opportunities digitalization and also AI actually brought with them. But I also experienced how tricky it is to transform this very human interactive world into a digital one. So let me maybe, as I guess most of you are not restaurant operators, let me just give you a short idea about how it looks like to run and operate a restaurant. Maybe then educate you what is actually happening within our industry and what is the major shift that we face nowadays, and how we actually apply machine learning and natural language processing to kind of support restaurants in this transformation process. Seatris.AI is, as you can see, a restaurant revenue management and reservation assistant using artificial intelligence. And actually, what we do is we know that restaurant businesses nowadays lose 1/3 of their annual sales revenue in operations, not only because of COVID-19. We had a crisis even before. Restaurants are on a 3 to 5% profit margin, so razor slim profits they operate with. On the other hand, they need to make their business attractive to customers, thus spend actually between 15 to 30% on marketing costs, and this is much too much. So our business model in the restaurant industry is kind of lacking, and it needs an update. So let me explain you what are the most common struggles operators in restaurants actually have. If you run a restaurant, there's typically these three things that you always have in your mind. So one is actually very basic. So where do I get my next new customer from? This is kind of marketing challenges they have, and they don't really know how to solve that. If I actually attracted new customers, how do I actually make sure when they come to my physical business that I can make them come back, not only through great service, but also digitally? And now in the future, how do I actually encourage them to maybe buy some of my products online? So this is one of the things that they always have to think about. And last but not least, actually nowadays, when you operate a restaurant, there's a dozen of systems that your staff needs to kind of handle and keep track of. And nowadays they kind of push buttons to solve that kind of problem. And this means they cannot focus on the here and now, and they cannot focus on you as a guest. And this needs to kind of change. All in once, so our entire industry is actually facing a big shift. Not through COVID, as I said. COVID is just an accelerator to this. But the entire industry, retail and hospitality, is shifting on its own, because these kind of location-based businesses, similar to what we experienced with e-commerce 10 years ago, they're now on the way from being half physical to becoming half digital, because this is a consumer expectation. And this means when we look into the future, one fine day, machines will actually really be in control of the sales process that now has been taken care of real restaurant people. As I said at the beginning, so the profit margins are razor slim. So how can you change that kind of business model? Probably you will change that using more machines and using more automation. So it's very obvious and only a matter of time when machines will kind of take over these processes. And we're in the middle of transforming this process. And of course, the next iteration of what is going to happen in the hospitality industry then is that humans will start to support the machines to get the job done and improve. So this is what we will actually face next when data is kind of connected. And at least when this kind of process is done, it's something interesting that will happen, or that we can foresee, because at least hospitality has always been very human. And in the end, what can happen with applying all these new technologies is that it will be even more human in the end, because it was always the job for the restaurant people to entertain you and to give you the best time of your life. And actually what technology should do is to enable them to get back to to this kind of human-like experience. So this is what restaurant operators actually deal with nowadays. Now, let me shortly give you an idea of what we believe will the future look like for you as a guest and how you will actually book a restaurant in the future. So there is a really important change that took place 4 years ago. It took place when Google actually thought Google Maps is a location-based service that actually should have a deep impact into every of our lives. And Google decided to keep the project going and actually turn the idea of you moving from A to B into a business. And this is something that has changed in the past 4 years with Google Pay, with Google Maps as a service, and with a lot of things that become so convenient for every one of us that it will be so easy to consume goods which are location-based that you will want to stay within that world. And Google is kind of enabling that world to you and to all of us. So what the expectation of every one of us will be actually in the future, you actually want to know if you want to visit a hairdresser or a doctor or a restaurant, you actually want to know if it's worth that 400 meters walk. Because you want to know if you will get that seat that you're looking for and if you can order the food already while you're going there on your device. So this is the future. So what's actually then the pain of scheduling tables and seats? So why is the future not here? So let me shortly give you an idea of what it means to schedule a restaurant. If you need to sell seats and tables on the floor plan of your restaurant, you actually need to deal with a lot of things. So everything is quite high dynamic. It's reservations that come in and people that cancel, people that change their mind. So this entire number of tables that you have available, so they can change up to 10 times a day until you end up with the real-time situation. And there needs to be a human basically taking care of that. So they need to oversee that. They need to see that in 2 days there will be a cancellation for a group, and this actually changes the entire plan. And currently, there is no system out there which kind of keeps track of the changes and improves. So this is why we decided to come up with a table management tool as a foundation and to put artificial intelligence behind. So what does it mean? Actually, it means that we understood that restaurant floor sales is actually like a Tetris with seats. And you need to randomly play that Tetris with seats. And the best way to play it is through machine learning algorithms. Currently we use a mixture of, sometimes it's very basic, old school branch and bound, together with genetic algorithms. And we always try to find the best search space possible to increase sales on the floor. And this is quite exciting because all of a sudden, so there doesn't need to be a human in place, which kind of keeps track of, oh, there's a change. So how do I need to actually move all the tables to just create an ideal sales case and make more space for other people that might want to come. So now we have an algorithm which kind of solves that for the restaurant host, and they can actually more or less lean back and just take care of people who come to their business. So with the data we aggregate and the consumers we actually learn about now, we actually know that right now the problem in the restaurant industry is that 10 years ago they started to give away their data. It's not their own, and they don't own it, so they can't work with it. So the idea and the mission we had is we want to give them the control back so that they can start to understand how to use the data resources that they have available as a physical business. So what we did is that we actually started to collect all the data, made it visible, turned it into something that is very familiar in the hotel industry, which is called revenue management, to be able now to make first predictions for marketing teams, when to actually schedule events, when it's more likely to attract new customers, and also how you should schedule your stuff. So it doesn't only mean that we can understand how seats get filled and refilled and how we can cater to that kind of sales needs, but it also actually means that in the near future, we have all the data that can be aggregated in not only a reservation system, but all other systems as well. we actually become able to tell a restaurant manager how likely it is that this bus with 60 old people actually will stop by tomorrow, and how much staff they should have available to actually host those people. And this is a major problem we have in the restaurant industries. Staff scheduling is very, very tricky. So what I would like to show you now is a voice AI that we built to actually in the future give the restaurant manager an idea when they come to work, how they actually need to set up their sales channels, and what it means in terms of staff scheduling, in terms of the revenue potentials, and how they can actually better perform in their business. So let me start a video, just show you a short, quick overview, or not, wait.
Let's get the test version of my restaurant matrix. Hi, please give me an update on your staff schedule for today.
Hi, today I have 3 of 5 waiters, 4 of 5 cooks, and 3 of 3 drivers.
Okay, do you want to hear my recommendation?
Yes, go ahead.
Gladly, the weather today will be sunny at 26 degrees. Try to use more for deliveries will be less than planned. The demand for your terrace will be very high today. The best business today is with your terrace and when you offer more pickup options within your web shop. Should I log in 2 drivers as waiters and generate your capacities for today?
Yes, please.
Great, you now have 5 out of 5 waiters in the dining room, 4 out of 5 cooks and a jumper who can drive deliveries. Your capacities have been adjusted for reservations, pickup, delivery, and in-store sales. Do you want to hear how much sales you are potentially making today?
So I stopped it, could go on and on. So the idea is to not show restaurant people data slides because they can't deal with it. So they don't know how to analyze it and how to deal and how to turn these insights into actions. So the main goal we have is in the future to use voice to actually collect all the data which is available to make a great recommendation how they actually operate their business. So saying that, there is another thing at the beginning which we always saw and really disliked in the restaurant industry. So restaurants actually should be human places and places of interaction. And what we saw in the past years is actually a bad development. So there were a lot of tools that have been built, a lot of interfaces that were used. And all of a sudden, restaurant people end up watching on screens and not watching on you. And what we, what we actually learned is that most of the time the restaurant team spends so much time to search for information about you as a guest or about something they need to perform and do that they actually cannot really focus on the guest experience. So we said voice will actually transform pretty much the way restaurants will operate. That's why we currently already test in restaurants a voice assistant, which, for instance, gives them a very simple task to do. So they can check in people who arrive at the restaurant, understanding who they are, and just give them the right seat at the right time to that right customer. Why is it so important? Because at the beginning, when I introduced you to the vision of Google actually offering everybody real-time reservations or orders and pickups, we actually need to enable our industry to become able to cooperate with these kind of online services and really give you that value of being available in real time. And this is what we are actually up for. So we believe connecting these kind of dots, these data, we empower restaurants to lower their marketing spends at the end, build much stronger relationships with you as a customer. And of course, we can help them to create a more sustainable business model, which is now that we have these kind of COVID-19 experience, which you can imagine for restaurants was a very, very hard one. We actually can help them to to go into a very glorious and successful future. So this is what we're up to. I think, so there might be a lot of questions, how we do it. I'm happy to answer them, and yeah, feel free to ask.
Super cool, Vivien. And before I come up with some questions, and I have a few, just waiting for the audience, somebody in here to have a question immediately. Please unmute yourself. Right. So while you think, then my question first, maybe. So, quick one, right, Vivien? Is the industry ready for this already? You know, just thinking about the conversation I had yesterday with my neighbor who's running a Vietnamese, super nice Vietnamese restaurant here in Berlin, but they're struggling with like, should we use Lieferando already or not? And they just switched to like, they don't really have a website yet, even like a proper one. They have a very basic one. So I was like, should I talk to them about Seatris at all? Because that seems so far away for them. And that's just one example, maybe an off one, but I was like, what's your perspective on this one?
Yeah, so at some point you might be right. We are in that transformation process, and in Berlin we have 20,000 restaurants, from a kebab up to a fine dining place, and you need to see the long-term vision with what we do. So probably not tomorrow somebody will, the place you mentioned will not sign up to use voice AI. So even they will struggle to sign up for Lieferando because they don't understand the benefits and the business and how they can actually drive it. But the big question which is out there right now is, will these businesses be in business in the next 5 years still? So can they actually drive a successful business model? And some family-owned old school places probably can, but the majority actually has the problems I described at the beginning. So too much marketing spends, too high costs, too much labor, too much rent, and too much, you know, if you go on Lieferando, you pay 30% of your revenue to that platform. And there's a reality, if you look at the very normal price calculation, it doesn't work. So you'll run out of business in the end. So it's not really a question about, is the industry ready? Because if Corona has actually shown one thing, then how people needed to quickly adapt because they needed to. And it showed us the dependencies. So for me, it's more a question of how quick will we transition into the world.
Yeah, interesting.
But there's no, for me there's no so it's because it's not because of if it's at the end it will be voice AI which kind of kicks off, but the idea of Google actually owning the customer, of restaurants who actually stand in line, no matter if it's on Lieferando or if it's you know, on Google Reserve or wherever. So they're all competing with each other, and the one who wins is actually the one that builds a brand where you can find that identification, you know, where you always want to come back, and this is the struggle they have. So somebody who can answer that question as a restaurateur actually will win in the end. And that's what it's about, no matter which technology you use.
Yeah, that's true. And that's, of course, also, you know, a matter of size, right? So if you have a very small restaurant, it's hard, it's easier to kind of manage the whole process. Whereas if you have a kind of a large, maybe in a restaurant with 100+ seats and so forth, then of course the technology is already available in those restaurants today, and then they have a different perspective on it. Okay, cool.
I have probably two questions. Maybe these are a bit more skeptical. In my history, I was working as well, like a few years ago in restaurants, and I pretty know how busy and stressful a day in a restaurant as a waitress can be. So if it's crowded as hell, you don't have time for probably anything. You're just running around all the time. And like my skeptical question is, do you really think that voice is the good way to go? Because I know it from my private life at the moment. I don't use voice so much. I have Alexa, I have Siri, probably I have everything I've got or you can get on the market, but I really don't use it because sometimes it doesn't understand you so good. When I'm thinking about a restaurant, it's loud in the background and all that stuff, and it's probably kind of, or could be weird for a waitress to talk to a machine when maybe other guests are waiting and all that stuff. So do you have other options than, for example, voice, or is this your way, what you say, this is the way it should go?
Thank you, that's a very good question. Because indeed, so let me talk about the struggles we had at the beginning. So one of the first struggles we had was finding the right device, having something which is kind of noise canceling, but at the same time, you still hear what's around you. So that's important for restaurant people. Then we needed to identify the names. So, and this is one of the reasons why you still cannot reserve the voice, because it is still tricky to understand your name. And then if you have a name, it needs to be connected to an account. And this is one of the trickiest problems restaurants face nowadays. If you reserve and we don't know who you are, so we don't have your account and your bank details, and you don't show up, we have a problem. So there's some time to go. But for restaurant staff, actually the most natural way of communication has always been voice. And I remember when I was in Chicago 10 years ago, I noticed something that you will probably barely see in German restaurants, because we are really, really behind when it comes to technology. But when I used to be in Chicago 10 years ago, everybody operated through a headphone. So they all had their headphones and they were communicating on 3 levels with each other in the team. And I remember when I used to run a restaurant, one of the first things that I installed was a kind of a walkie-talkie, you know, because I used to run 20,000 times in the basement to just, you know, call some dishes for a table, and this kind of drives you mad. So it's really a stressful job, and it's always for me a matter of, okay, where do we put things? How do we integrate them into service? And this is a challenge. So it's nothing where I believe this is going to take place in 1 year from now and everybody will run with voice AI. No, but for me, it's very important that we keep on following these developments, because, you know, 5 years ago, Google Translate was a nightmare. Now it's getting better and better. So we all need to understand. So, you know, 10 years ago, navigation was poor. So now you are on Google Maps and you probably want to find everything which is out there because they made it work. It took them time, and the first time of experience was bad. But now we're in a stage where we already have such a convenience level that it actually kicks off. And this is the same with voice. So the reason why I keep on investing into voice is because I think it's nothing that will turn to business tomorrow, but it's very, very worth following it, because at the end of the day, it is the smartest solution and the one which feels most natural for people. So when we communicate in restaurants, we use our voice. So most of the time we also use our eyes. So perfect teams actually communicate by saying nothing, because you know where you will go and what you will do, and this is actually how you run a successful restaurant. But we need to be honest. The new staff of a restaurant is probably people who are students, and probably they don't want to become the perfect waiter. They just want to understand where they need to go, what they need to do, and how we can help them to do it better. And this is why I think it's worth investing into it.
Thank you very much for your answer. So don't get me wrong, it's Thomas Bischoff typed it in the chat pretty good. That's what I thought at the first moment, and I was never thinking about an AI solution, especially for that use case you had. So it's super interesting, and I think it could be a solution in the future. But that's one more question, pretty short question. regarding Juri's neighbor with his small Vietnamese, or what was it, Thai restaurant?
Vietnamese, yeah.
Yeah. So isn't or do you think that your solution is maybe a dream for the big restaurants, for the very high visited restaurants, and the debt for the small ones? Or do you? It depends on your business model, especially, of course. But don't you think that the small businesses will have problem in the future to follow up that technology race?
Yeah. Okay. So that's a good one. So you mean in comparison to large restaurant chains,
Yeah.
how can small SME how can SME survive? Indeed, that is a tricky challenge because not because of our technology, which is one of the cornerstones within a big tech stack that you need to have nowadays. I think what's really tricky is how can a small enterprise business actually remain relevant online. So if Google Maps is kind of the one to go to platform, which is going to become right now, and everybody's on Google Maps, and you have 20,000 restaurants being on Google Maps. So, and then you have your Keats, your department, where you actually want to find the local businesses which are relevant to you. At the end, the benefits of having a chain is that you can actually buy more marketing spend than a small, medium business. That's why I think it's so important for the restaurant industry to find ways outside Google. So it's really important to kind of lower the marketing spend. And this is why I always believe that customer retention is the biggest topic they should focus on. So if they can actually build a local community, then a small, medium enterprise can more or less survive and even be more attractive than a chain. Because I think what we also have in Berlin is this kind of diversity, right? So the benefits of the small businesses is that they're very unique, and they have a chance to drive their uniqueness outside of Google. And this can be their benefit also in comparison to a chain. And I think there is a market for both. Nevertheless, we have these numbers in from our gastronomy, the Hoga people, and I mean, they already say that we will lose 50% of the market and the restaurants that operate. Nevertheless, I need to tell you, it is also time for a market cleanup, to be honest. So because the restaurant industry had a lot of struggles with finding new stuff, hiring people, making it attractive for everybody to work in the restaurant, because people will get paid pretty bad. And I think actually there's a lot of great potentials out there if you just make the right decisions right now. And I think so if you make the right decisions as a small, medium enterprise business, you can survive pretty well. Because at the end, there's always a kind of balance, if you're small, your rent is lower. If you're big, your rent is higher. And this kind of balance, so as a small business, you cannot spend that amount of marketing, which is the benefits of having a franchise. But on the other hand, a franchise which operates big spaces, and now, for instance, let's say, for instance, next to a Mercedes-Benz arena, those guys are also facing difficulties right now because there's nobody living nearby, so you can't attract new customers. So it's always challenging for both.